Hello, 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 everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome back. We're going to be reading the next 3 chapters in The Sacred Art of Forgiveness by Marcia Ford. As a reminder, if you've been following these videos, or actually if you've not and you're just catching this one, this author is going to take us through step by step the art of forgiveness, how it can benefit our lives and enrich us, and even our physical health, certainly our mental health, our spiritual growth, which is super, super important. The author will take us step by step and give us a little bit of a story with each chapter, and then we'll do a reflection, and there is a practice that she recommends. You can follow along with the practice or you can just listen. I do feel either way you will greatly benefit. If this video resonates with you and you feel that forgiveness is something that you could work on in your life, then keep on listening. So we are on chapter 25. We're going to be reading chapter 25, 26, and 27. I do apologize. My voice is a little bit hoarse. It's been weird where I live. It's really hot, but it's been windy, so my allergies have kind of been acting up a little bit. So, excuse me. So I'm going to do my best to keep it not too loud, not too soft with this. And I do also have a portable AC unit in my room. Our AC went out on us, and I live in California where it gets pretty hot. So we have some portable AC units in many of the rooms while we wait for our new one. And God bless having them. I cannot tell you, it's been a blessing, because I don't know how anybody lives in the extreme heat. It's so bad for you. Okay, excuse me. So let's go ahead and get started with chapter 25, Listening with Your Heart. Vietnamese monk Thich Nhat Hanh is a prominent Buddhist author whose books have attracted the attention of people of all faiths, and with good reason. He became prominent not by drawing attention to himself, but by the wisdom of his teachings and the examples of his life. One of the practices he has incorporated into the daily routine of his monastery in France is a simple but profound one used by the monks who answer the telephone. Before they pick up the handset, they take one deep breath to disconnect from whatever they are doing, and a second deep breath to connect with the caller. This practice prepares them to give the caller their full attention. I'm afraid this is one exercise in mindfulness, or being fully present in the moment, that I fail at time and again. I am decidedly not a telephone person. I'll give the telephone credit for making it easy to schedule appointments and such, but once a call reaches the 5-minute mark, I start to get antsy. Really antsy. Heaven help the caller if I'm at the computer. I often keep right on working, striking the keys as quietly as possible and making sure the speakers are turned off. Fully present in the moment. Hardly. Mindful of my work maybe, but not of the caller. Thich Nhat Hanh's phone answering practice hasn't changed mine, but it has impacted my life in another way. It's made me aware of how seldom I disconnect from whatever I'm doing and give my full attention to someone who is talking to me. Not only is that disrespectful, but also the failure to listen attentively and without judgment seriously impedes our efforts at reconciliation. Whether another person is attempting to reconcile with you or you are the one seeking to reconcile, you owe it to yourself to listen carefully to what it is and isn't being said in the conversation at hand. You also owe it to the other person, if only out of respect for their humanity, though you may not accept that notion right now. By listening carefully, that is, not just with your ears, but with your heart as well, you may discover that it was a misunderstanding that caused you to part ways in the first place, that you were far more responsible for the rift than you ever thought, or that reconciliation in this particular case is not a wise move after all. Listening with the heart requires a genuine desire to understand what the other person is saying. It also requires a set of practical listening skills that we would all do well to master. Kay Lindahl, founder of the Listening Center and author of The Sacred Art of Listening, 40 Reflections for Cultivating a Spiritual Practice by Skylight Paths, has developed 9 general guidelines for deep listening. After each one of her guidelines, I've shown how it applies to efforts in reconciliation. So guideline number 1, suspend assumptions. That is a huge one. Don't interpret the other person's meanings according to your experience. Recognize that they're speaking out of their own circumstances, which differ from yours, perhaps greatly. Number 2, use I language. When it's your turn to speak, avoid using the words you, which can sound unnecessarily confrontational and accusatory. Number 3, listen without judgment. This one is tough for many people, but do your best to resist the urge to think in terms of right or wrong, good or bad, true or false, as the other person is speaking. Number 4, suspend status. This is where parents often derail attempts at reconciliation with their children. Treat the other person as someone who is on equal footing with you. This is no time to pull rank. Number 5, maintain confidentiality. The very act of seeking forgiveness or reconciliation is humbling enough. Don't add humiliation to the mix by revealing to others the sordid details that you know should be kept private. Number 6, listen for understanding. Another tough one. Enter into a reconciliation dialogue with the awareness that you don't have to agree with everything the other person says. You simply have to try to see the situation from their perspective. Number 7, ask questions. If you don't understand the point the other person is making, even after careful listening, ask carefully worded questions to gain clarity. Number 8, be silent. You don't have to fill every space with words. At times, you may both need to reflect on what has just been said. Number 9, one at a time. This is a biggie. Do not interrupt the other person, no matter how much you disagree with them, how wrong you think they are, how angry they've made you, especially if you're angry. Hold your tongue and calm yourself down. I'm going to add a 10th guideline. Compliments of the great spiritual leader and writer, Francois Fenelon. Listen less to your own thoughts and more to God's thoughts. That's what it really means to listen with your heart. Take a deep breath. Disconnect from your own thoughts. Take another deep breath and let God's thoughts about you, about the other person, about the entire situation supersede yours. Be open to the Spirit's leading. Be vulnerable to the Spirit's power to transform. Be willing to consider the Spirit's creative path to reconciliation. Reflection. Think back to a difficult or uncomfortable conversation you recently experienced. Analyze what went wrong or right according to Kay Lindahl's guidelines and Fenelon's. Excuse me. Here's the practice. See if you have better success than I did with Thich Nhat Hanh's telephone answering ritual. Try to get in the habit of taking 2 deep breaths when the phone rings. 1 to disconnect from what you're doing, and 1 to fully connect with the caller. I love that one. I'm going to try that. And here are our quotes. You must understand this, my beloved. Let everyone be quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to anger. James 1, verse 19. All who strive for reconciliation seek to listen rather than to convince, to understand rather than to impose themselves. Brother Roger. The first duty of love is to listen. Paul Tillich. There is a grace of kind listening, just as there is a grace of kind speaking. Frederick William Faber. Now, chapter 26, 70 times 7. So we're going to be talking about in the Bible when Jesus was asked by somebody how often they should forgive their offender. How many times should I keep forgiving this person? And he said 70 times 7. I'm so sorry. Okay. At various times during Jesus's 3-year ministry, his disciples would come to him with a bunch of questions that they hoped would clarify some of his teachings. They were a fairly dense lot, those disciples. In the Gospel of Mark in particular, you get the impression that more than once they even managed to exasperate Wrong word. You can just see them losing sleep over a teaching that they can't quite get. In Peter's case, that would be Jesus' teaching on forgiveness, among others. And so he asks this priceless question: Lord, if another member of the church sins against me, how often should I forgive? As many as 7 times? Now really, I ask you, what was Peter thinking? Was he trying to quantify forgiveness? Was he hoping Jesus would help him justify his unforgiving spirit by saying that once was enough? After that, the person did not deserve a second chance? Did Peter even hear what he was asking? The question is so absurd that the Message paraphrase implies that it took some nerve for Peter to ask it. Since Peter seemed to pull the number 7 out of thin air, Jesus responds on Peter's level by pulling his own number out of thin air, 70 times 7, which for the mathematically challenged is 490 times. Some translators insist that his response should be translated as 77 times, proving that 2,000 years later we're still trying to reduce Jesus' teachings to a more manageable point. Whatever. If you think Jesus literally meant 490 or 77, well, I guess there's nothing I can write that will prevent you from keeping score. Though I must say, I'd love to hear from you when you reach number 491 or number 78. What a book that would make. See, Peter not only missed the point about forgiveness as a way of life, he also missed a basic understanding about forgiveness, as many people who read about this encounter between Peter and Jesus do. They insert words into Matthew 18, verses 21 to 22, that just aren't there. Jesus says, forgive. They read, forgive and let them back into your life and let them keep on abusing you and offending you and hurting you, even if they do it 77 or 490 times. Jesus is talking about forgiveness. They're talking about reconciliation, which by now you should realize are not the same animals at all. One of the hallmarks of Jesus' ministry was his relentless love. Biblical scholars may refute my opinion on this, but it seems to me that Jesus was making a point here about relentless love, that we have to keep on loving people by forgiving them. You can exegete any Bible verse to death, but what gives life is the spirit of the teaching and the spirit of the person giving the teaching. Jesus was all about love, and he was all about forgiveness. Jesus understood Peter because he understood human nature. He understood that Peter was looking for a loophole. He wanted Jesus to give him an out. Come on, Jesus, get real, he seems to be saying. You can't mean I should forgive someone like 7 times. You've got to be kidding me. He wants so much for Jesus to turn to him and say, don't be ridiculous. Whatever made you think I expect you to forgive someone 7 times? The truth is, he probably didn't expect Peter to forgive anyone even once, but he knew Peter had it in him to be better than that. He was proven right, of course, though much later. We all have it in us to be better than that. God has given us the ability to rise above the abuse, the offense, the hurt, and keep on forgiving while never dismissing the impact of the pain or allowing the abuse to continue. We need to keep on forgiving for as long as it takes. Reflection. How does your ability to repeatedly forgive someone make you a better person? How does your standing with God and the forgiveness you have received in your life factor in your ability to forgive someone else over and over again? Practice. The Quran has this to say about repeated forgiveness. Forgive and overlook till God accomplish his purpose, for God hath power over all things. That requires knowing what God's purpose is in a given situation. Is there an incident or person in your life that seems to require you to forgive over and over again? If so, ask the Spirit to show you God's purpose in that situation. Okay, so let's go ahead and read the quotes from this. To forgive the incessant provocations of daily life, to keep on forgiving the bossy mother-in-law, the bullying husband, the nagging wife, the selfish daughter, the deceitful son. How can we do it? Only, I think, by remembering where we stand, by meaning our words when we say in our prayers each night, forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. C.S. Lewis. to realize that you are safe and happy standing at God's side with his love encompassing you because you are forgiven. Too happy to take offense anymore, too much in love with life to want to be made miserable with an unforgiving heart, and knowing that now every conflict is a chance to learn more of the exceeding beauty of love. That is worth living for, and surely worth dying to this misery-making self for. Florence Alshorn. Forgive, forgive, and forgive more. Never stop forgiving, for the temptation to project and judge will always be there as long as you are living in the body. Forgiveness is the key to peace and happiness, and gives us everything that we could possibly want. Gerald G. Jampolsky. All right, and chapter 27, Unleashed Joy. I can't think of a single story in any religious tradition that so perfectly captures the joy of forgiveness as the story of the prodigal son does. Being a prodigal myself makes it all the more meaningful to me. But even if you can't relate to the younger son's squandering ways, you may be able to appreciate it just because it's such a good story. The way Jesus tells it, the younger of the man's 2 sons was impatient to get on with his life. So he asked his father for his inheritance in advance. Soon after, he left home and blew through his money in no time. Unfortunately for him, famine struck the land where he was living, and he was forced to get a job in a pigsty. He realized that the pigs were better off than he was, and that brought him to his senses. It also occurred to him that his father's farmhands had it pretty good. He decided to humble himself, apologize to his father, and ask him to take him on as a hired worker. Here's where the story gets really good. When he was still a long way off, his father saw him. His heart pounding, he ran out, embraced him, and kissed him. The son started his speech. "Father, I've sinned against God. I've sinned before you. I don't deserve to be called your son ever again." But the father wasn't listening. He was calling to the servants. And this is from Luke chapter verse 15. Luke 15, 20 to 22. I always mess that up. I do not know why. Because I keep saying I mess it up. That's why. Did you catch that? The father was so overjoyed at his son's return that he didn't even hear his apology. No matter. The young man was forgiven before he even asked for forgiveness. That's how quick love is to forgive. The father then directs the servants to clean his son up, dress him in clean clothes and sandals, and place the family ring on his finger. The staff gets busy preparing a special meal in honor of his son's return. "We're going to feast. We're going to have a wonderful time," the man said. "My son is here, given up for dead and now alive, given up for lost and now found." Can't you see the excitement? Can't you feel the joy? All is forgiven because the son is alive. Father and son are reconciled at last, and nothing else matters. The Bible says the angels in heaven rejoice when even one person turns to God. In the parable of the prodigal son, Jesus paints a stunning picture of what that looks like. When we're still far off, when I was still sitting in judgment of everything Christian while the biker professor droned on about forgiveness, the angels in heaven are positively jubilant, and God is already coming to meet us more than halfway. Oh my, oh my. If God is our model for forgiveness, which I believe God is, of course, then we should kick up our heels and sing and dance and shout for joy when a repentant friend or relative comes seeking for our forgiveness. Or at least we should feel free to do that. However we express it, we need to let joy, genuine, deep down, regardless of the circumstances, joy, rock our spirit. The way that leads back to the Father's house after the bitter experience of sin comes through an examination of conscience, repentance, and the firm intention to be converted. John Paul II said in an Ash Wednesday address in 1999, referring to this parable, "It is an interior process which changes the way one looks at reality. It makes a person realize their own frailty, and it spurs the believer to throw themselves into God's arms." This parable gives us the most concrete expression of the work of divine mercy in the human world. I couldn't have said it better. Reflection. Meditate on this insight from George Seaver. There is no situation in human life, however apparently adverse, nor any human relationship, however apparently uncongenial, that cannot be made, if God's be in the heart, into a thing of perfect joy. Do you believe that? How can adverse situations be transformed into a thing of perfect joy? Practice. Practice being joyful. Really, you can do that. In the privacy of your own home or room, shout out a prayer of joyful praise to God. Thank God for the joy you have in your life, for everything that makes your life matter, for the people and the things you love. Remember that joy is not the same thing as happiness. Happiness is a fleeting happiness is a fleeting feeling and depends on circumstances. It's without. Joy is a lasting condition that no circumstances can change, at least not for a very long time. I've always been under the impression and understanding that happiness is found without, but true joy is found within. All right, let's read our quotes. Joy is not gush. Joy is not jolliness. Joy is simple, perfect acquiescence in God's will, because the soul delights itself in God. Amy Carmichael. A laugh to be joyous must flow from a joyous heart, for without kindness there can be no true joy. Thomas Carl. Seek to cultivate a buoyant, joyous sense of the crowded kindnesses of God in your daily life. Alexander McLaren. Where there is joy, there is creation. Where there is no joy, there is no creation. Know the nature of joy. Upanishads. Forgiveness unleashes joy. It brings peace. It washes the slate clean. It sets all the highest values of love in motion. In a sense, forgiveness is Christianity at its highest level. John MacArthur. The ineffable joy of forgiving and being forgiven forms an ecstasy that might well arouse the envy of the gods. Elbert Hubbard. Okay, so that completes our segment of the book. Our next chapters will be reading 28, 29, and 30, accepting forgiveness, sharing the blame, that's a pretty good one, and can we forgive God? I'm pretty interested in that chapter and what it has to say. I've never looked at, well, we'll go into that later, or maybe we won't, because this is more just me reading to you and you taking it in however you believe it, because we all have our own truths, and it's just as simple as that, really. So thank you so much for joining me. If it is really, really hot where you live, please stay cool. Please take care of yourself and those around you, and I will see you again soon for the next few chapters. Take care. Bye-bye.